Hey guys, welcome back. We're still in chapter 3. I know it's kind of our longest chapter. So chapter 3, meiosis, development and aging, and we are moving on to section 5, which is about birth defects. We're going to start by talking about something called the critical period. So if you guys are ready, let's get going. All right, so the critical period is when a prenatal structure is sensitive to damage by a faulty gene or an environmental insult. Now, what it means by environmental insult is that something in the environment, some kind of toxin or radiation or deficiency in a diet, something outside of the genetic code has a negative impact on the development of the fetus. Now, most birth defects originate in the embryo and are generally more severe than problems that arise later in the pregnancy because the embryo, remember, it's still forming the supportive structures and hasn't really done much to form the individual organs. So any birth defect that affects the embryo has a much higher chance of affecting more cells in the body, which is why it can have a more severe effect or more severe problems. Now you notice that on this slide, I didn't tell you specifically what kind of time period we're looking at. And that's just because there's so many variables. The exact faulty gene, different faulty genes can have a critical period at different times, different exposures to different toxins or other environmental effects can have critical periods at different times. Also, the amount of the exposure can affect when the critical period is. So it's really hard to just give a straight time frame. But here are some examples. So you can see the age in weeks at the top. And you can see red indicates highly sensitive period, whereas the yellow is kind of not as much. Sorry. So for the central nervous system has a critical period anywhere from 3 weeks to 16. The heart is from 3 to 6 weeks. Upper limbs from 4 to 5 weeks. Eyes have a more severe critical period between 4 and 8 weeks. Lower limbs, 4 to 6-ish. Teeth, by the end of the 6th week to 8 weeks. The palate in the mouth, end of same as the teeth. External genitalia from 7th week to 16 weeks, and the ears from 4 to 9 weeks. Sorry. So they're letting you kind of know a little bit more about what's going on. And you're not going to have to know all that stuff. Just know what the critical period is. We are going to talk about certain things called teratogens, though. So teratogens are chemicals or agents that cause birth defects. So this can be drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, having too much of certain nutrients like certain vitamins, malnutrition, not getting enough of certain nutrients, occupational hazards. So if you're exposed to asbestos or radiation at the job, or if you certain infection agents, so certain bacteria and viruses can also lead to birth defects. And the way that they pretty much work is they're in mom's system. They go through the placenta. And from there, they'll go into the baby. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about a few teratogens. I'll move my camera also. So one of them that we actually have an article that we'll talk about in class is thalidomide. It was a drug that was originally patented to help with morning sickness in pregnant women. But what they found is that it also affects the development of the limb buds, which will then lead to actual preventing the limbs to form. So sometimes they won't have any limbs, or they'll have very small limbs, or maybe they'll have arms but no legs, or legs but no arms. Cocaine, drugs in general are typically bad. They can cause fetal stroke. They can also affect the growth of babies. So a lot of times babies can be born already addicted to drugs like cocaine, and they'll be very small. Then you can tell it by this baby how tiny it is. And now that baby has to go through withdrawal. It's not easy for an adult. Now a baby's got to do it. Cigarette smoke can result in growth deficiencies. It can even result in miscarriages. You can also have some other things like a smaller vascular system. Alcohol can result in fetal growth syndrome, which is characterized by growth problems, physical. They can grow slower, as well as mental retardation. You see the baby here has fetal alcohol syndrome. And this baby over here, the mom smoked with. She was pregnant with that baby. All right. Lifestyle. So we mentioned excess nutrients such as vitamin A can actually affect normal physical or mental development. So it can affect how the body develops and grows, how it's put together. It can even affect how the mind is developing and how it can function in terms of information processing. The baby up here, there was an excess of certain vitamins, and you can see the physical development abnormalities. Occupational hazards, such as mom being exposed to radiation or toxic chemicals like lead, mercury, etc., asbestos. These can also affect the baby, and the exact hazard and the amount of it will affect the development of the baby. This baby here was exposed to high concentration radiation. Let's talk about in terms of infectious agents. So infectious agents such as rubella, also known as German measles or herpes simplex, can result in numerous birth defects and or fetal death. So what they're saying is there are certain viruses that if the mom gets them into their system, she can then pass it through the placenta to the baby, and it can affect baby's growth and development. Women who contract rubella during the first trimester run a high risk of bearing children with cataracts, deafness, and heart defects. You can see the cataracts in this young child here. That was because mom had rubella. Fetuses exposed to rubella during the second or third trimester may be born with learning disabilities, speech, and hearing problems. So a lot of mental development at that point gets affected, and juvenile onset diabetes. What they've also noticed is that 40% of babies who are exposed to vaginal herpes lesions become infected, and half of them will die. So if the mom has herpes, not always a bad problem, but if she has active lesions on her genitalia during birth and she gives a traditional vaginal birth, the lesions could actually pass the virus from mom's lesions to the baby through the eyes or other areas. And now the baby can be born being exposed and having herpes. And that's very hard on their young body, which is why about half of them will die. Another effect of certain infectious agents on babies is microcephaly, which is the skull being too small. And that's what you see with these two young girls here. Also tends to affect the heart, leading to early heart disease as well. Oh, that's right. Camera again. There we go. All right, so that's it for section 5. Not too bad, not like section 4. If you have any questions, hit me up in our Google Classroom or by email. Don't feel shy. And until next time, you guys just stay awesome, stay curious, and most importantly, stay safe and healthy. All right, you guys. Bye-bye.